What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be breaking down my NBA playoff preview for the Boston Celtics and asking a simple but straightforward question. Can the Boston Celtics repeat this year? And really, like I said, it's simple and straightforward in ways, but also it's very complex because we see the type of juggernaut that the Boston Celtics were last year in the regular season and in the playoffs. Last year, regular season wise, having a 64-18 record, only losing 3 games in the playoffs last season, dominating the Eastern Conference playoffs and dominating the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals, winning in a gentleman's sweep when many, really, you can make the argument that they should have swept the Mavericks in that playoff series. But this year, obviously, they're going to be the second seed, so they're not going to have total home court, especially if they play against the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals, which we totally expect. Even being the second seed this year, at the recording this video right now, they have a 58-20 record. We fully expect this team to still win 60+ games this season, and we really recognize the juggernaut they are. Obviously, having Jayson Tatum, who I swear is arguably, in my opinion, he probably is the most polarizing player in the league, and in my opinion, I honestly don't see why. I mean, a lot of people just hate for no reason. I don't like to bring race into things, but I mean, maybe it's because he's light skinned. I don't know. Maybe it's the Kobe stuff that people think is corny or things of that nature. But you can make the argument right now that Jayson Tatum is the best two-way player in the league, period. And I don't think that's a hot take to say. Like I said, a lot of people hate on him naturally, so people will probably backlash to that comment automatically. But Jayson Tatum, he's also a model of consistency, and he doesn't miss a lot of games. I mean, for example, this season has already played 70 games, probably going to make an all-NBA first team. His averages this season, averaging essentially 27 points per game, 9 rebounds and 6 assists, shooting 45% from the field and 34% from 3, a little lower percentage from the 3-point line, but still the volume that he shoots it at, it makes sense. But I know Jaylen Brown, he won the finals MVP last year, and this year he's having a good season as well. I know that he's been dealing with a knee injury lately, but hopefully that won't trend too much in the playoffs, because if it does, this will really change my perspective on the Celtics' chances in the playoffs, because make no mistake, Jaylen Brown is a huge part of why the Celtics won last year and why he'll need to be a huge part this year for them to win, as he's averaging 23 points per game, 6 rebounds, and nearly 5 assists. But make no mistake about it, in my opinion, guys, Jayson Tatum, he is still the best player on this team. I know a lot of people, like I said, would probably disagree with that, but people recognize when you have the conversation, the face of the NBA, he still is in the conversation for that because the type of player and play style that he had, and like I said, he really doesn't miss too many games. But the conversation with the Boston Celtics is the overall roster, and rightfully so, because I think this year they also, before I get into the starting lineup, I think that they have the 6th man of the year in Peyton Pritchard, who has been hooping this year, who's really had an uptick in his role in trends last season, but really this season overall, he's really had a huge boost in playing time, and this year he's averaging 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, shooting 46% from the field and 41% from 3. So make no mistake, I think that he's going to win 6th man of the year. So before I even talk about the starters, besides Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I think Peyton Pritchard, he has been a huge star in his role. I know a lot of y'all guys remember the game earlier this season when him and Derek White individually both had 40 points in the game. That is absolutely insane, and that's coming from like your 4th or 5th best players on the team. I mean, that's insane. So when you have that type of firepower on your team, that makes it even further and more valid conversation of why and how the Boston Celtics can repeat. But then you talk about the starters like a Kristaps Porzingis, you can make an argument that he's really the X factor of this team in terms of health, because you saw Game 1 of the NBA Finals against the Dallas Mavericks last year. When he was on the court, it made the Dallas Mavericks nearly have no chance. I mean, the type of presence that he has defensively and being a perimeter threat on the offensive end is like no other. And even a player like Al Horford, who is older, he's 38 years old right now. By the time if the Celtics make the finals, he would be 39 years old. He's aging like fine wine. Still a huge threat defensively, but also from the 3-point line, as he's shooting 36% from 3 in his 18th season. That's remarkable in itself right there. But when you move on to other players who, of course, are important to this team, obviously Drew Holiday, you know the impact that he had when he was on the Milwaukee Bucks, but in his first year with the Celtics last year, he was a huge part of why the Celtics won that championship with his defensive versatility, being arguably the best guard as a defender in the league. I think that probably goes without debate, but I mean, there are a lot of good guards now that we could talk about as defenders, but Drew Holiday has been that for over a decade now, him being there, and also offensively, he's able to get buckets when he needs to. But then you add different role players who at times are able to make a huge impact, like a Sam Hauser, a really good shooter, and his defense is solid at times too, and we saw that last year in the postseason, and he shoots 41% from the 3-point line. Luke Cornett, at times, his defensive versatility has been really integral to the team as well too. So at times the Celtics, they can go 7 to 8 and maybe even 9 man deep depending on the matchup in the games that they're playing. That's a huge thing, and it's really a testament to how Brad Stevens, as a GM, of course formerly being the head coach, how he has done in his front office role, really developing this team. So that has really worked wonders. And Joe Mazzulla, who I know a lot of people will say, and rightfully so, that this team was set up by Ime Udoka when Udoka was a head coach, then reached the finals in his first year, and now you see the type of success that he's having with the Houston Rockets this year, being the 2 seed in the Western Conference. But Joe Mazzulla, for the circumstances that he was dealt with and winning a championship in his 2nd full year as a head coach, that is pretty impressive. And what he's doing now with the Celtics, you have to give credit to him as well too. But I think all of those reasons and circumstances are why the Celtics have a real chance to repeat. And as I continue to talk about in this video, we're going to break down each individual reason why, because like I said, besides the Oklahoma City Thunder, when you're breaking down all the teams and contenders that have a chance to win the championship, and I'll continue to say this for the rest of these playoff preview video, there's only a short list. Obviously only one team can win, and for the Boston Celtics especially, and if they're clicking on all cylinders, particularly from the three-point line when they can get hot there and being lethal offensively, really in my opinion, even Oklahoma City Thunder, who will almost win 70 games this year, I still struggle on who I think would win that matchup. We're going to continue to talk about that further in this video, so y'all stay tuned for that for sure. Also, before we get into the preview, guys, make sure you check out my other NBA playoff previews. I've done 3 so far. First previewed the Oklahoma City Thunder, then I previewed the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Houston Rockets, and of course the Celtics in this video. Now we have a few more previews upcoming before the NBA playoffs start, and we'll also of course have an overall playoff preview in terms of how I think the playoffs are going to go in general. But y'all stay tuned for this overall series for sure, because it's doing great on the channel and I for sure appreciate the support. But with that being said though, guys, before we get further into the Celtics playoff preview, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter /X at SwaggyRuss, on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02, all different videos and things of that nature like that if y'all want to talk about sports, things of that nature, and more content that I have coming. But with all that being said though, guys, let's get into this Boston Celtics playoff preview and talk about if the Boston Celtics can repeat. So really, I want to go on and address the Jason Tatum aspect head on, because like I said, he is the most polarizing player in the NBA in my opinion. So throughout his 8 NBA seasons so far, he's been an All-Star 6 times, been a part of All NBA team 4 times, and 3 of those times been on the All NBA first team, of course having an NBA championship last year, winning an All-Star game MVP and the Eastern Conference Finals MVP in 2022. I think it's not even a debate to say that he is building up quite the resume, only being 27 years old right now in his 8th season. And like I said, I don't really understand the hate, but of course when you're doing something at a high level and just regardless in life, you're gonna have fans and you're gonna have haters regardless. That's just a part of the conversation. But with Jason Tatum, I really think that this year, especially off of the playoffs last year, because let's be real, let's keep it a buck, especially in the finals, he did not play great, and that's some of the criticism, which is valid, that some people have against him, people thinking that he doesn't show up in the playoffs, or at least in the finals when it matters most. That's a valid conversation there, especially when you look back at the 2022 NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors, and then after that, like a month or so, a reported injury coming out. You don't want to have that type of stuff coming out, because no one cares about an injury. If you're playing, you're out there playing, you're good enough to play, so you're going to be judged by how you play. But I will talk about those numbers, because in the finals against the Warriors, he averaged 21 points per game, 7 assists and 7 rebounds, and maybe that might not sound terrible, but for his standard, especially making the finals in that year, and of course he was younger at that point, he was 24 years old, but still, like I said, when you get there, there's no excuses. That's not acceptable. And you look at games 1 and game 6, they were completely unacceptable. Game 1 of course sets the tone, and of course game 6 they were eliminated in that Golden State Warriors finals. But in that first game, yeah, he had 13 assists, but he only had 12 points in that game in game 1, shot 20% from 3 and 17% from the field. That's unacceptable. And then when you look at game 6, had 13 points, like I said, only shot 33% from the field and 25% from the 3. So like I said, those conversations in terms of him not playing best in the playoffs, it's valid, I'm not gonna lie, especially in those finals then. And then when you look at the entirety of the 2023 NBA playoffs, I will say he upped his performance overall. He averaged 27.2 points per game, nearly 11 rebounds and 5 assists. He was super efficient, shooting 46% from the field, not as efficient from 3, only shooting 32%, but I will say his volume of scoring overall was better. And when you look at that series against the Heat, he had a couple of games where he was pretty inefficient, particularly in games 3 and game 7, but overall he averaged 25 points in that series, 10 rebounds and 5 assists. So not too much of a difference. Like I said, for the playoffs that year he averaged 27 points, but in this series he averaged 25 specifically. And in that game 7 he did get hurt. Let's add context to that, and I know a lot of people probably won't want to hear that, but he got hurt like super early in the game. So I know, and they were down 3-0, so people aren't going to want to hear that excuse. And really, that was a crucial year. Everyone really going to the playoffs last year, that's why there was so much pressure on the Celtics to win. So of course they delivered in that aspect, but that was a real conversation about Jason Tatum being a guy that you can't depend on potentially as a number 1. But of course with them winning the finals in 24, that shut that down. But I say all of this to say though, guys, and I know that he didn't average the best in 2024 either, because in the finals against the Mavs he averaged 22 points, 8 rebounds and 7 assists, but in the playoffs he averaged 25, 9 and 6. So I say all of this to say though, with the disrespect in terms of how things were handled at USA Basketball, with him barely getting any playing time for the Olympics, I don't care what y'all guys say. Y'all might hate Jason Tatum. I know that a lot of people think he's polarizing and people hate on him a lot. There's no reason why Steve Kerr and that USA Basketball coaching staff couldn't have found more minutes for him. I know Kevin Durant, LeBron, and them were playing. I understand that, and of course you have other integral players and roles that need to be played, but Jason Tatum, he has the type of versatility and skill set where he can play nearly 1 through 5, but definitely 1 to 4 of course. So I still don't understand that, but I think that in itself, along with, you know, some of the hate that he's receiving, criticism in terms of being compared compared in terms of people thinking he's corny and stuff like that. I think that for sure is going to give him the perfect opportunity to unleash in the NBA playoffs. And that's facts. Now, if the Celtics have a thud, and, you know, like I said, I don't really expect the Celtics to lose early in the playoffs. I think for sure that we're going to see the Celtics and Cavs meet in the conference finals, because when you look at the rest of the East, no offense to teams like the Knicks, the Bucks, the Pacers, and even the Pistons, who have been great this year, don't get me wrong, I give them no chance against the Celtics and the Cavs, to be honest. But unless the Celtics just get dominated by the Cavs, which I don't foresee happening, I think that they're going to be in prime position to repeat, and Jason Tatum is going to be a real reason to that. And I think the best evidence of us seeing an improved version of Jason Tatum in the playoffs is from what we've seen this season. But like I talked about, some of his overall stats, the growth that he had after those 2022 finals and then leading into 23 and 2024. But like I said, this regular season as well, because when you look at it from an efficiency standpoint, for his career, he's been consistently around a 45% shooter from the field, and this season it's the same exact type of numbers. Like I said, though, his 3-point percentage is down a little bit, but that's a volume because he's taking nearly anywhere from 3.5 to 10 a game. So of course that varies, and the Celtics, they're a high volume team. But Tatum, I think that we all can come to the conclusion, if he plays any semblance of how he plays in a regular season, or is just super efficient and aggressive throughout it all, not being passive, I think the Celtics, they can be even more lethal than they were last year. And that's a huge if, I know that. And like I said, if Jaylen Brown is diminished in any type of way, not in terms of his skill set, but in terms of his health, because he did miss 9 of his last 23 games recently, that's going to be a huge factor, and Jason Tatum is going to have to step up in that aspects. But if Jaylen Brown is, 80 to 100%, I think the Celtics still have a really good chance of repeating as for sure making the NBA Finals. But if Jason Tatum is averaging nearly 30 points per game, for example, in the playoffs, and playing at a level that we haven't seen yet, because at this point, 27 years old, he's getting closer to entering his prime. That's the thing about Jason Tatum as well. Like I said, in those finals, those first NBA Finals against the Warriors, he was 24 years old. So we're not going to give him an excuse for that in terms of, him being there and losing and not performing, but he was young and that was his first experience. But that's the thing about the Celtics too, though, because unlike a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who we recognize as being the best in the West, the Celtics, they've been experienced being in the playoffs since really Jaylen Brown's rookie year, but for sure Jason Tatum's rookie year in 2017-18. So they know what it takes to win at a high level, and it finally culminated and came together last year. So you can make the argument that last year is just the beginning in terms of a potential dynasty run for the Celtics, and it's hard to go back to back. We haven't seen a team do that since the Golden State Warriors in 16-17 and 17-18. But the Celtics, with Jason Tatum playing at a high level, nearly 30 points per game, I think that they could be close to unbeatable, even potentially playing against a team like Oklahoma City Thunder. That's my take about Jason Tatum, and it really just comes down to him playing at the highest level possible. And we know the type of playmaker that he can be, especially at times him having triple doubles. He's had a couple of triple doubles this year. I think he's really an underrated playmaker. But if Tatum is able to get his scoring unlocked in the playoffs and really just thrive and get hot, I think that the Celtics are nearly unbeatable. But moving things on to Jaylen Brown, like I said, his health is a real wild card this year. And I'm not saying that as if he's been injury prone this year, but like I said, recently he did have a stretch where he was injured because of a bone bruise in his right knee. But for example, in this recent game against the Phoenix Suns, he had a 31-point outing against the Phoenix Suns. So like I said, it seems like he's getting near to his full health level. Him and Jason Tatum are playing at a high level like that. You can definitely, I think for sure, shoe in the Celtics for making the NBA Finals and potentially repeating. But beyond that though, I talked about his averages for this season, but the type of player that he can be at times out the mid-range and really just being a volume shooter, working inside out, and the athleticism that he provides, but defensively as well too, still being one of the best overall all-around players, I think so as well, like a Tatum. It's interesting because at times Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they can both play the 3, but of course one sometimes will play the 2 and the Jaylen Brown playing the 2 and Jason Tatum playing the 3 or even a 4 at times, but they can both be point forwards too as well. So with their versatility, they just make things difficult for opposing opponents on the defensive and offensive end, and them together, when a lot of people used to question earlier in their career if they could play together, really, I think in many cases a lot of people would agree that they're the best duo still in the league right now, especially after last season. But with Jaylen Brown, them two playing at a high level, and Jaylen Brown, we know his stats from last year's playoffs. He averaged 24 points per game, shooting over 51% from the field, nearly 52% from the field, and only 33% from the 3, but still, like I said, the volume and the efficiency overall was still pretty consistent. And then in the finals, of course, like I said, Tatum didn't play the greatest, and Jaylen Brown's stats don't necessarily fly off the wall to you how he played in the finals, but he still did enough and had enough of good performances to win Finals MVP, averaging 21 points per game, shooting 44% from the field, and a lower percentage from 3, only 23.5%, so that's not the greatest example. But I do say that to say though that the type of run that Jaylen Brown had last year in the playoffs overall and in the finals warrant that conversation of where to, if Jason Tatum isn't playing well, which was a reality at times last year in the playoffs, that Jaylen Brown will pick up the slack, or even a vice versa at times. If both of these players are playing at a high level cohesively and are in rhythm, I think the Celtics are the best team in the league, and really nearly unbeatable, because with them two as the stars on the team, and then in combination with their depth and players like I mentioned a second ago, which we're gonna go in furtherly with Peyton Pritchard in a second, and how he has been instrumental in the success of this team in the second unit and at times starting when he needs to. They just provide teams problems, along with a Porzingis, or along with Drew Holiday and Derek White, who I still think is one of the most underrated guards in this league. And it's gonna be interesting because a lot of people thought that this Celtics team wasn't gonna be able to be too much together as currently constructed, but of course Derek White just signed a 4-year $125 million contract extension last offseason, and Drew Holiday signed an extension as well. I guess the question is going to be with Kristaps Porzingis and how long they're going to be able to retain him. They have that core four of Tatum, Brown, and of course Tatum just had that huge contract extension last year and Brown the year before, but you have Tatum, Brown, Holiday, and White. You still have that four together. You can try to really address the rest of it, and I know that the salary cap right now in the NBA is tough, especially with the second apron. And even, for example, with Peyton Pritchard, they have him still signed with the team through the 27-28 season, so even with him, you have a core still together for some years to come. So like I said, for example, throw this video out the water and the Celtics miss the finals, don't win the finals, things of that nature, or losing the finals, they still have a chance to win in 2026 as well, of course, and even 27-28. So it's not like they're going anywhere for the most part. And with Porzingis, yeah, it would suck to lose him, but you know the type of injuries that he battles at times, and sometimes him being out the lineup, they still account for that. So you can make the argument that they can address his position through trade, through free agency, through the draft at some point. So even with some players like that being gone, you have those 5 players in Tatum, Brown, Derek White, Holiday, and Peyton Pritchard. You're still looking pretty good for a while. But that is a good segue into Peyton Pritchard though, because like I mentioned his stats earlier, he's averaging 14, 4, and 3. A lot of people were just talking about his half-court shots that he would make in the finals and the playoffs last year, but this year he has been a huge fixture to this roster. And with all the talent that they have 6 players that average in double figures. Peyton Pritchard, being the player that he has been this season, has been a huge boost. And if he's able to continue to be efficient in the playoffs with the second unit and being rotated with minutes with the starters and integral parts of the game, especially in crunch time in the fourth quarter, we're going to see the Celtics, like I said, win at a high level this year in these playoffs. I mentioned that game earlier in the season when Peyton Pritchard and Derek White both had 40+ points in the game. They made 19 threes together. And like I said, this Celtics team can get hot. When you look at the Celtics stats from a 3-point and shooting overall perspective this year, they lead the league. First of all, like I said, they average nearly 117 points per game. They make nearly 18 threes per game. They also shoot 46% from 3 per game, which is insane. And after recording this video, they broke the NBA record in terms of total threes made in a season, breaking the Golden State Warriors record. Like we know, they can get hot from the 3-point line. I think that's the biggest question though that I do have about the Boston Celtics, living by the 3 and dying by the 3. And like I said, last year, they didn't bite them at all. They didn't die at all. And if you look at their overall stats from a team perspective, from points per game, like I said, averaging 117 per game, opponents' points per game, they still have a top defense, only limiting opponents to nearly 108 points per game. An interesting stat is that they rank last in pace, but I really think that doesn't make too much of a difference because in the playoffs, the pace does slow down and a lot of teams have to play in the half court. So that really favors the Celtics. Their offensive rating is 2nd in the league. Their defensive rating is 6th in the league, so they still have a top 10 defense. And they have the 3rd net rating in the league. So overall, from a stats standpoint, advanced stats and just stats in general and shooting wise, they rank amongst the top in the league. But that's what I said though. Shooting percentage in terms of living by the 3 and dying by the 3, that's the one thing, because when they are on, they are nearly unbeatable. But when they're off, teams like the Cavs, for example, they could have a chance. Teams, if they make the finals, like the Thunder, who ranks one of the top in the league in terms of defense, they'll have a chance. I think though if the Celtics lose the finals, for example, if they make it there, the only team I have them losing to would be the Thunder potentially, because like I mentioned, they lost to them 2 times in the regular season, which like I say is a small sample size, and really you can't judge too much in the regular season compared to the finals, let alone NBA finals. But that's the only team I would pick the Celtics to lose to in terms of if they were to lose the finals. They play the Nuggets, they play, for example, the Warriors, who they look really good with Jimmy Butler, or Lakers or Rockets or other teams like that. The Celtics make the finals. I think the Celtics are beating those teams. And I'm not saying it's not going to be competitive, but I would pick the Celtics in those matchups. But for Boston, in my opinion, to really lose the finals this year, or just really not make the finals, the Cavs will have to go crazy. They'll have to be the type of dominant team that we've seen from them at times this year, when they've won 17 games in a row, when they've won 12 games in a row, when they won 16 games in a row. That type of Cavs team will have to play and beat the Celtics, because it takes a lot to beat this team, let alone 4 times in a 7-game series. But with the Celtics, with Tatum, with Brown, with Pritchard, with how he's playing, with Derek White, with Drew Holiday being the lockdown player that he is, and Al Horford, who is, yes, old, reaching closer to that 40-year-old age, but still playing at an extremely high level defensively, still being able to move his feet on the perimeter, and at times with that pick and roll, he will kill you with that pick and pop 3. I know it's an ugly shot, but he still be knocking them down for sure. I still think they have the adequate amount of weapons to still beat any team in the league. I don't care if the Thunder, they won 68 games this year. It doesn't matter, because like I said, the Celtics, they had that experience in terms of not only winning last year, but losing in the finals, losing in the conference finals, losing all those playoff series from the past 5 to 6, 7 years, which ultimately resulted in them breaking through in the finals last year, which took some time. And I know a lot of people, for example, the Celtics, if they lose, I can only see them losing to Oklahoma City. But even with Oklahoma City though, yeah, they lost in the second round last year, but besides that, in the 22-23 season, they were fighting for play-in spots. The year before that, in the 21-22 season, that year they were awful, and that's how they got Chet Holmgren in the 2022 draft. So it's not like this Thunder team has necessarily been battle tested overall in the playoffs, and I think that's why a lot of people like Shannon Sharp disrespect the Thunder.
It don't matter, divorce court, child support, Lou Dort. Bigger than 5.
Saying stuff like that. But like I said though, for the Celtics though, I think that's the only team that they could lose to. If we get a golden NBA finals where we have the Celtics and Lakers, I have the Celtics beating the Lakers, especially with how we saw the Celtics play defense against the Mavericks and Luka Doncic last year, playing Luka again in the finals and then against LeBron James at 40 years old. And I know Austin Reeves has improved tremendously this year, but if the Celtics played against them, I think that's barbecue chicken as well there. So the only team that I can realistically see the Celtics losing to in the NBA finals, they make it there, is the Thunder. And there's no guarantee for the Cavs to beat the Celtics. I know when you look at the matchups this season between the Celtics and the Cavs, it's been dead even at 2-2. Really, all the games have been competitive. You look at the first game in November when the Celtics and Cavs played, Celtics won that 120-117. In December when they played, the Cavaliers won by 4 points, 115-111. On February 4th when they played, the Celtics won by 7, and then the final game where they played, the Cavaliers won by 7. So it's not like these games have been totally one-sided one way. I do remember though, at first the Celtics were absolutely blowing out the Cavs and then they blew that lead, so that was a testament to that. But in the playoffs, it's going to be even tougher. And like I said, that series, if the Celtics and Cavs play in the Eastern Conference Finals, which I pray and hope we get that, I think it'll go 7 games. But say, for example, if it doesn't go 7 games, if it was completed in 6 or even 5, I think the Celtics will win in 6 or 5 because the type of dominance the Celtics team has had. And I don't really buy it going 6 or 5 games. Don't get me wrong. I'm not about to disrespect the Cavaliers like that, especially with some of the pieces that they've added, particularly from the trade deadline, like a DeAndre Hunter, and who I talked about in my Cavs playoff preview, which if you haven't seen, go check that out. I think he's going to be instrumental in trying to guard guys like a Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown and other perimeter players. So I don't think it would go like that. But if somehow or some way this series between the Cavs and Celtics went 5 games, or if it was short 6-5 games, something like that, I think it's because of the Celtics were just that dominant. But we have no real reason, especially compared to the regular season, to think that that would happen. But like I said, you can't necessarily compare that in a vacuum to the playoffs, so you never know. But I think that is for sure the Eastern Conference Finals that we want to look forward to. And overall, for the playoffs perspective, in the East, those are the 2 teams that we're looking forward to. But in terms of a team against the West, it really doesn't matter because I think it'll be an entertaining finals regardless, unless there's some type of injury, which we pray that doesn't happen, that'll really just mess things up. But I think that we're going to be in tune for a great NBA finals for sure. But yeah, but for the question in the title of the video, can the Boston Celtics repeat? I think it absolutely is possible. Am I going to pick them to repeat? If I have to right now, it's tough because y'all know I'm a Houston Rockets fan and my favorite players are Luka Doncic and Devin Booker, but I have to worry about Devin Booker because the Suns not making the playoffs and they have been the definition of disappointing. Don't get me started on that. But if I have to be real and just answer the question and say it like this instead of can the Boston Celtics repeat, because obviously they can, but do I think they will repeat? I'm gonna say no. And like I said, I don't want to directly compare the regular season matchup to the Thunder and Celtics, but how they played in that matchup, particularly Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, it's hard for me to say that the Celtics will beat the Thunder in the finals. And now, like I said, can they win the finals and can they repeat? Absolutely yes, the Celtics can repeat, but do I think they will? Like I said, there hasn't been a repeat NBA Finals champion in 7 to 8 years with the Golden State Warriors consecutively, so I'm gonna say no. Tie it back to the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander point with the Thunder. If it's Thunder versus Celtics, let me talk about the numbers that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did to the Thunder this year. We obviously know that he's leading the league in scoring. He's gonna win the scoring title, and most likely SGA is gonna win the MVP. Trust me, Nikola Jokic definitely deserves love and conversation for that, for potentially winning the 4th MVP, but I think that this season, especially with the Thunder, the type of record and success and dominance they've had this year, I think SGA is gonna win MVP. But what SGA did against the Celtics this year, that's kind of why I have paused about saying that the Celtics will necessarily repeat, because he averaged basically 34 points per game in these 2 matchups against the Celtics. Like I said, small sample size, but he averaged 34, 8, and 7. He went off against them. And in the most recent game against Boston, when they played against them in March, he had 34, 5, and 7 and shot 55% from the field. That's why I say it's kind of just hard for me to pick the Celtics to just automatically repeat. Yes, they can. Will they though? I don't think so, because of just how long it's been that a team has done it, and the parity in the league being at an all-time high right now, which is so good for the league league that I think. But I will say though, if there's any team that could repeat though, it could be the Celtics. I'm gonna say that the Celtics won't repeat, but they absolutely can. If you return to this video in June after the NBA finals are done and the Celtics end up repeating, don't make it seem like I said that the Celtics can't repeat. They certainly can, but I don't think it's likely that they will, just because of the type of high level basketball that we're seeing in the Western Conference and Eastern Conference, and particularly the West, because I think it's going to be an absolute gauntlet to get to the finals. And with the Celtics winning the finals last year, I think that honestly Western Conference team is going to win NBA finals. I know Cavs fans don't want to hear that, and especially Celtics fans hearing that in this video don't want to hear that. But the answer to the video question, yes, they can repeat, but I don't think they will repeat. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Do y'all think that the Boston Celtics will win this year's championship and win it all again? I know a lot of the video I mentioned how polarizing that Jason Tatum is. Overall, the fan base of the Boston Celtics, they're very polarizing from a fan base perspective. A lot of people can't stand the Celtics, particularly just fans of the NBA in general, and there's a lot of reasons why. I could maybe get into that or guess why, but I don't really want to. That's a funny thing in itself. So y'all let me know in the comments down below. Do y'all think that the Celtics will repeat, or are you hoping that they don't? Y'all let me know. Guys, I appreciate your love and support always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, like I said, at Swaggy Russ. And just overall, if y'all want to talk about sports, talk about these NBA playoffs, talk about upcoming content that I have in terms of the NFL draft and prospect ratings and things of that nature, y'all let me know. And stay tuned for more of these previews. There's only going to be a couple of more previews left because, like I said, realistically, I think that there's honestly only 6 to 7 teams that are real contenders to win the finals this year. And ultimately, only one team is going to win. There's no purpose in me creating 16 playoff previews for every team because, first and foremost, there's definitely not that many actual contenders. That's how many teams are going to make the playoffs. But come on now, like there's only usually 5 to 6 to 7 teams that are going to be real contenders, and I feel like that's the same for this year. So we have a few more in this playoff preview series, and then we're going to get into the actual playoff preview just overall from a playoff perspective and really predictions leading up to when the weekend the playoffs start. But like, I'll stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for more videos in general. Stay tuned for some more NFL content that I have. So we're going to rate some of the top 10 prospects for this year's NFL draft because that is a few weeks away. And then also we're going to recap the NFL draft as well too. So y'all stay tuned for that, guys. And like I said, just hit the subscribe button, turn on post notifications because we are going up this year. A lot of great content is in store. So y'all stay tuned. But I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support always. Y'all been going crazy recently on the videos, especially the uptick in subscribers. It means a lot, guys. Y'all be blessed. I have a lot of stuff coming. Know that you matter. Know that God has great purpose for you. Jesus loves you. You are here for a purpose and a reason, and I love y'all guys. Y'all be blessed and y'all have a good one.